Hello, everyone. Welcome to one more episode of Changing the Game. So, Mihailo, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, Wilson.
So, it's very good to have Mihailo Bozic today from Envited. So, we'll go through the story. So, tell you guys how I met Mihailo. But Mihailo, today is about you. We would love to hear your story. So, we've been in your, seeing you in the news, in your LinkedIn profile. But we would love to hear from you your story.
Yeah, I guess so. I am a 23-year-old founder of an events app called Envited. It all started at university. So I was at UWA finishing my undergraduate in finance and economics. And at the time, I was part of a few clubs and societies, and I wanted to throw parties. But the issue was that we couldn't bring down first-year students because they didn't use Facebook. And so I was like, well, Snapchat and Instagram don't have events. I want to build something for them so that I can throw a party and I can invite them. And that's really how Envited all started. And we ended up, my co-founder at the time, Jordan, and I starting it during our final semester at university. And then kind of from there, it ended up becoming our career job.
Cool. Nice. Well, you talk about this story of how, you got the idea of Envited and you form it and etc. So let me go a little bit back.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about Mihailo.
Yeah. I think I was always just a very different child. I always I know when my friends were watching YouTube videos about gaming, I was watching TED Talks. I was always curious about everything. I think curiosity was at the heart of my personality, and still is. And so that's really driven me to a lot of different places. I know with my first job, and this was a job that my parents couldn't even believe that I got. I was year 10 at the time, and I was making memes, Star Wars memes, in fact. And someone hit me up and asked if I wanted to actually get paid to make memes. Of course, I said yes. And I told my parents this, and they thought it was a scam until the very first paycheck came through. And so I've always been a little bit left of field in that way, and kind of in where I go down my career path.
So it's interesting. So that's the first time that I hear a story with this perspective of feeling different and now different from the friends and etc. So was that hard?
It's a good question. I know for me, it was just the norm. I guess I ended up surrounding myself by just very curious and different friends whom I love very much. So I think it almost acted like a natural filter. So it personally didn't affect me too much growing up, but it was definitely something that I just noticed that I had different interests.
Cool. And then you decided to go to uni, you study at UWI. So
Yes.
can you share with you're still a very young guy, so being an entrepreneur, founder, and etc. So not long ago you were making a decision to go into university.
Yes.
So how was that process, knowing that you were a little bit more curious, a little bit different? How you chose what course you do, and how was that process?
I know I didn't have a choice whether or not I went to university. I have very strict Serbian parents, and it was an expectation if I wanted to have a roof over my head that I would have to go to university. So I would say that they chose it for me. But I know when I was picking my degree, I actually wasn't sure what I wanted to do at the time. I thought I wanted to do law. My parents were like, go become a doctor. And then I was like, you know what? I just want to do finance instead, because I was like, at the end of it, it seems like a pretty good choice. I always liked maths, and so went down that finance route.
Very good. So here we are, university, and then you tell a story, or you tell a story of your first job, let's say. So then you went to university, got involved with student clubs, and etc. So do you have other stories about being more entrepreneurial or building things or having companies, or before you ever thought about Envited?
Yeah, it's a good question, because when I think about building things, I really do go back to the meme pages, because there I actually started my own meme page, and it was the very first thing that I built and grew. And from there, that actually was like the foundation for everything else that I did. So when I was at university, I took an entrepreneurial class called Bloom. And there, I had this idea for a different startup called Payday, where people could get their pay earlier rather than having to wait 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And so I used my Star Wars meme page, Just Jedi Things, to get people to respond to a survey about it in order to end up getting like an A for that class. So very much like I was always like leveraging the things that I had already like built and grew to new and different things. Obviously, like what does a startup at uni have anything to do with a Star Wars meme page? Well, I wanted to make the connection, and so I did.
Very good. Awesome. So knowing a little bit of your story, so to be more clear on that, so remember we met
Yeah.
when you register yourself or apply to be part of a student competition, right?
Yes.
So the GSA, the EO.
Yeah.
Funny enough, the previous conversation I had in Changing the Game was with someone else that also participated in that
amazing
competition. So I don't know, it's a trend. And at that point in time was a little bit in the middle of the COVID still period, which is the period where you had the idea and created Envited. So how was that creating an event business in the middle of COVID?
Yeah, well, it was lucky. So one, we're in Perth, which ended up, even though we had lockdowns, life got fairly back to normal pretty quickly, and people were able to go out and still have fun. But kind of like the thing that I was thinking about always in the back of my head was like, eventually this pandemic will end. And so if I start the idea now when nobody's thinking about throwing events and parties, that I'll already be ahead by the time that it's over, and hopefully at a place where, once everybody is ready to get back to partying, that they can, and there's a platform ready for them to use.
Nice. So that's interesting. So never thought about that sort of anticipation and seeing a situation where it's not happening now, but it's going to happen in the future. So how was to start? How was your journey to build up the venture? So to get the idea, get your co-founder together, develop that idea, get money to fund it. How was the story?
Yeah, it was all just about solving little problems along the way. So the very first little, which is definitely a major problem that I had, was I had this idea, but I couldn't build it because I don't know how to code. And so the very first thing I needed to find was someone who wanted to build this with me. And it was lucky at the time that my girlfriend then, she introduced me to Jordan, who ended up becoming my co-founder. And he did data science and his background. And then we got a few of our friends as well to help us out. We were building this all in the computer labs at UWA. So it was a lot of fun, just after classes, Monday to Friday, we were there just, designing on Figma and then ending up building something scrappy and then scrapping that and iterating and making something better. I know we then entered into a startup competition in May of 2021. So Envited started in like March of 2021. Then in May, we entered into that, we won. And from there, we decided, all right, let's take this a little bit more seriously because it seems like a really good opportunity. And we ended up just, basically leveraging the people that we met, ended up working out of Space Cubed and also WeWork in the city, just because of the people who had connections there. And so it was really sweet just jumping around and basically living the startup life. I know around June, we applied for StartMate, didn't get in, but that's when we started looking for funding. And one of those things where I just like looked up as many YouTube videos, articles as I possibly could about fundraising because I knew nothing about it. I thought it would be as easy as, walking in and being like, hey, this is my idea, please give me $1 million. And someone would just hand you the money, but really not the case. It's all about building relationships, especially over like a sustained period of time. And so what I had was like a spreadsheet of like all the investors I wanted to talk to, and it was almost like a CRM, right? To figure out, had they said no, were they interested in talking and whatnot, and going through that list very systematically. And we met our current investors, Galileo, who are our first investors, in July. And then we caught up with them like every 2 weeks, showed them our progress, what were our numbers like. You know, we would, while the product wasn't built necessarily, we were able to get a wait list going to just show that there was interest in it. And then, going from there. And then in December, Galileo invested with a few other angel investors, which is fantastic. So that was how we got our first round of funding. It did take almost 9 months to get there.
So there's a few interesting things in what you just shared. So one is, I just thought it was going to be easy. So, that's my idea. Give me $1 million. So strike me as, I'm curious about the fact that, you had a belief that it would be easy.
Yeah.
So, but then you went about to study how to do it, and you talk about Galileo being your first investor.
Yep.
So, if I'm not wrong, this is second half of 2021.
Yeah.
So Galileo is in Sydney, right?
Correct. Sydney and Melbourne.
Okay.
And I'm in Perth.
Yes.
So it's all Zoom calls.
And we're still locked down by
the border.
Not in WA, but with the borders closed.
Yeah.
You couldn't travel, couldn't meet with Dan.
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah, so it was all just Zoom calls. I guess building a relationship over Zoom. I thought it was pretty normal. I know when I ended up meeting James and Hugh for the first time after they invested as well, I was like, damn, Hugh's tall. And I was like, James is exactly what I pictured him to be. They're the two managing partners. They're absolute legends. I guess like over Zoom, you're still able to make a pretty good professional connection with people. It's hard to like lie when you have data. Right, like data at the end of the day is what investors want, and that's what they want to see.
Yeah.
You present them the data, numbers don't lie, so you can kind of tell that story behind that.
So I'm curious about that because you did over Zoom and blah blah blah. So I can see it coming very natural from you, like just reach out and just have the Zoom calls and etc. Do you think that's related to your age or demographic? Because the assumption is that particularly to have some money invested, so you'd have to have some sort of meeting or some sort of face-to-face sort of thing.
Yeah.
So where did you get that confidence from? You think it has to do with your age?
Yeah, I think I was just naively optimistic. I still think I am. And like when I look back on the time, like when we got investment, I was like, I honestly can't believe they invested in us. Yeah. Like looking back from where we were then to now, I was like, maybe now they should have invested in us. Not then, but I guess that's the theory of like investors that, they get in early. If they see an opportunity, they meet founders that they like, that fit their investment mandate. I mean, yes, I'm young, but like what I'm working on is for young people, right? And so like I really have that startup founder fit that investors are looking for. They want to make sure that I care about the problem and I experience it. So that
very
works.
good. So potentially these venture capital investors are there, and if they don't do that, so what else they're gonna do? Because they can travel as well. So.
Yeah.
Good, very nice. So tell me more about, so you got through that barrier of getting your first investment. Now you have something to work with.
Yep.
And you have to build your MVP, you have to build your solution.
Yep.
Tell us more about the journey of from what you think, what you thought the product would be and people would engage, to the reality of putting an MVP in the marketplace and get people to sign up. So tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So when the money came through, we're like, oh, okay. So now we can like go hire people and like we can figure out exactly what we want to build. And so at the time, Envited was a website, but we were like, no, we want it to be a mobile app. Because ultimately we want to go after Gen Zs. Gen Zs are a mobile app first generation. They don't really use websites as much. And so it was really about like hiring people who had that skill set, both to like maintain a website and also to build an iOS app. Yeah. And so that was like the very first lesson was more so figuring out, okay, how do we even hire someone? Like I've never hired someone before. And so I guess like rather than looking at the way that companies did it, we just looked at it from first principles. We were like, we need someone to be able to do this, this, and that. We'll make a technical assessment for them to test that. If they can do it, we'll hire them. If they can't, we won't, because that's what we need as the company that we are. We don't necessarily need anybody with any other skill sets. That actually worked really well as a great filter. I know one thing that I learned kind of as CEO is like the three most important things of a CEO to do are be able to recruit, be able to maintain morale, and raise money. And those are basically like the three key pillars of a good CEO. And so on the recruiting front, I was like, well, the best way to recruit is to cast a wide net. And so ideally what you want is you want as many people applying as possible, because then statistically, one of those people is much more likely to be great than if you have a smaller pool. And so I went on LinkedIn and I looked for viral recruiting posts, and I found one, and I just copied and pasted it and just changed the name to Envited and like made it just Envited specific. And it ended up getting like 1 million views on LinkedIn, and 1,400 people applied for a role to be a front-end developer. We only had one role available. And Jordan and I were like, crap, what are we going to do with the 1,400 applicants? There's only 2 of us to look through them. And so that's where we were like, okay, rather than looking at resumes or anything like that, let's just give everybody this technical assessment, do it blind, pass fail them based on that assessment, and we'll use that to cut it down. And so of the 1,400, 600 did it. And of those 600, we cut it down to 60 for interviews. And then we did a technical interview to a cultural interview to a second culture interview. And we ended up hiring, actually, instead of 1, 2 people outside of Australia who were the best candidates by far, which was awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was like, I always thought that we'd just be hiring from Australia, but we ended up hiring outside.
You said 1,400 candidates apply for
Correct.
the job.
Yeah.
It's actually very good performance of a job ad. So
And it was completely organic. And nothing paid for, which is, great.
Very good. So I think we may have to learn something from you guys.
Yeah.
See how you did this. Very good. So what about my previous question? So then hire some people, put the MVP out there. What about that difference between the first clients, the first signups, the first downloads?
Yeah.
So what those the people you thought you're gonna be, or how that story goes?
Yeah, so it was like, I think one of the very first events that we had was some housewarming in San Francisco. And how that person heard about us was actually through that LinkedIn job post. Okay. Someone had mentioned it to her that, hey, I need to throw a party. Oh, you should use this platform. So she did, and like we got in touch, and it was actually really good, like getting that user feedback. And then we also threw our own events on Envited as founders to hopefully get people to see it, to use it, our friends, and see what they thought, get their feedback on it. And then I know that led to actually quite a few more events happening as a result, which is fantastic. And so it was like a mix of, that marketing side as well as the organic side. I know then we decided, okay, after, a few thousand users, we realized our user base are like 2/3 female between the ages of 15 to 24. Okay, brilliant. Where do they hang out? TikTok. Let's go down the TikTok route. So we started up a TikTok account and just started focusing heavily on TikTok, hired someone to make TikToks for us. And that worked out really well and ended up scaling from there, which is fantastic.
Okay. Fast track to today. So where is the company today?
Yeah, so now Envited is a mobile app available on the App Store. It still is a website. And one of the things that we're doing now is expanding beyond just events and looking more into the social media side of it. Because I think what we realized early on was like with events happen very like periodically. You might host one event once every 6 months. And you might attend an event once every 2 or 3 weeks. And it's not something that people engage with like necessarily daily. And we really wanted to get up user retention. And the best way to do that is through different social features. So rather than just focusing on events only, expanding that out into being like, hey, you want to be able to add your friends, see what they're posting. And that at the moment is what we're building next for Envited.
Very nice. So, okay. You are a natural, like like the way you mentioned before is naively optimistic sort of guy, right? So, and you are this nice person. You always smile, always look like everything goes well.
Yep.
So, What about your war stories, right? So some of our, the people listening to us and watching us, so
Yeah.
potential entrepreneurs that are looking at,
Yeah.
your journey as a benchmark or as a role model for them to look at things.
Yeah.
Well, I know that the journey is not that smiley all the time, right?
Yeah.
So, what about if you pick one or two war stories to share with
Yeah.
us?
Yeah, I think the first one is just getting used to rejection. So yes, I'm always like smiling and happy, but it's like behind it is ultimately like as a founder, you will be rejected a lot of the time, whether it be from investors. So we pitched to 60 investors and one said yes. So we got 59 no's. Or as investors like to say, not yet. And so it was like, that's a lot of time and effort that I've gone into like cultivating a relationship just to get rejected. At the same time, you'll get rejected from candidates. So when we were hiring people throughout the period, people that we thought would be a sure yes ended up saying no because they got an offer somewhere else, right? They, rather than working for a startup, they wanted to end up working for a big tech company. And it's like, you always just have to have a backup plan, or if not a backup plan, always looking forward. Because I think like when you die as a startup is just when you give up, right? Yeah, you can die when you run out of money. And in my personal opinion, that's better than giving up, because at least then you've exhausted, hopefully, all options possible. So it's never giving up, always looking forward and knowing that somewhere out there you will find that person that's right, whether it's an investor or a candidate to hire. Probably, and then another story is, well, I've talked a lot about Jordan, but Jordan's unfortunately left Envited, and he left on probably like the best terms that co-founders could leave. He decided to step away for his own personal reasons. Just running a startup is extremely stressful, and I think like Jordan's story really shows that with startups and the stress that it can cause, it can really affect you personally, and like at the end of the day you always have to make sure you're doing what's right for you, because there's no point in running a startup if you're going to just fall away at the seams, and it's going to impact your personal life and how you think and feel about yourself. And so I think like just being able to be in touch with yourself and what you're doing and what you're thinking and feeling is super important, because at the end of the day, the startup journey is not for everybody. And you can figure that out doing one, or you can figure it out beforehand. At the end of it, right? It's for some people, it's not for others, and it's not a bad thing. It's just important to know what your limitations are, and then just be able to recognize and appreciate that.
So that's a fantastic share, Mihailo. So yes, I think the thing that I heard the other day is that when you hear about being an entrepreneur or read about it or come to an accelerator and you see the pitch, so you're about this marvelous life of building your company and become a millionaire or whatever it is. So, but nobody, very rarely people tell you the other side of things, the side of the sacrifice and the hours and the rejection, as you mentioned. And you're quite right. So I'm sad to hear about Jordan, but at the end of the day, it's not for everyone. So it does require that sort of extra dedication and resilience, and the amount of rejection and the volume of work. So you're quite right on that. So well, we met before, so you know that I'm an angel investor. So as a part of that story, the goods and the bads, the journey to raise capital.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your experience on that. Of course, you told the initial story of pitching to 16 to get one, and was a nice pre-seed raise with Galileo. Is a nice brand behind, backing you.
Yeah.
So, but the journey continues, right?
Yeah.
So the money at a certain point finishes, and you need further capital. So how that goes?
I think the fundraising process is always ongoing. And you can be actively fundraising, and really what that means is you're like going out seeking meetings to pitch. But with the passive side of fundraising, that's always there. It's going out and just meeting investors. starting those connections early, meeting them like how we met at a very random spot, right? Which was some student competition for entrepreneurship. And, we ended up talking about Envited, and then over the course of, must have been 6 to 9 months, you decided to come and invest. And I feel like that process.
That's a good disclosure, everyone. So I am one of the investors in Envited. So
Sorry if I've added you there. But I think that process is really, you go meet someone, tell them about Envited, give them updates, whether it's a monthly investor update on an email, or it's just catching up for coffee, asking for advice, that sort of stuff, because then there comes that point where you're like, we need to raise more money. It's either because of growth or we got to make sure that we have enough money to be able to pay people. And not having that cold start is really helpful, because hopefully by then, investors have figured out, do I want to invest in you? Do you fit my fund's investment mandate? Do I like you as a founder? Do I think you have that 1% chance to become a unicorn and return the fund? So, yeah.
Very good. Tell us about where Envited is today.
Yep.
What's the current situation? How's it going?
Yeah.
What are your plans?
So just a couple of weeks ago, I came back from the US. So Invited's been big in Australia, but now I want to move it over to the US, and specifically to colleges. And so I spent a month over there talking to different students at those colleges to see, how do they run events? What are they looking for? What features do they want? And now really it's just executing on that and making sure that Envited can become the dominant player in the events and social space of universities and colleges in Australia, in US, and longer term around the world.
Nice. So what would you remember back the time you're there at university and thinking about what to do, and suddenly you figure out that there was a problem that you could go after solving it? So do you have any tips for students that are in that point where they're not founders or entrepreneurs yet?
Yeah.
But they think I think they want to have a goal, and that's the thing for them. So would you have any tip?
Yeah. Firstly, do it. I think, especially being young, I have no responsibilities. I have no family or kids to really look after. Now is kind of the time that I can take my most amount of risks, because startups are very risky. And so even if you come into the mentality that, hey, there's only a 1% chance I succeed, you may as well try it now while you can. Probably the second part of it is really just getting down and trying to create the simplest, barest version of it, and get one user on it or one customer. For us, it was just get one event, one organic event, something that we have no relation to, because that will tell you if there is any market for it. And if you have one person on there, then your next goal is to get 2. 10, 100, 1,000, and you just scale from there. But really simply, just start from bare basics. You're not going to build $1 billion company without, taking that first step and finding that first user and customer.
Very nice. So you cover quite a lot. So, I talk about from the idea, from your background, from the idea, how you started, how you get your first investment check, and your war stories with, the fall of a founder, and how you go about that, and etc. So maybe one more question for you to let us know what you're thinking about. One of the criteria that investors look at in companies that they want to invest or not is to know how much the founder is aware and have a plan to have an exit.
Yes.
Right? How you, Mihailo, think about an exit?
Well, ultimately, there's only 3 possible ways for an exit to occur. Either you die, you get bought out, or you IPO. And that is kind of the way that I'm looking at it. So, with the
Never thought about dying as an exit. So
yeah,
that's
well, dying is essentially it is an exit. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. You really don't want to die. Like that's the
You don't want that
last.
option.
Yeah, that's the least favorite. I think in terms of the other exits, I have found a lot of social media companies do end up getting acquired. Like, and you can see that most recently with Gas App over in the US being acquired by Discord. And it's one of those things to decide. And I think the best way to decide it is based on your data as to whether or not you should exit. Because, for instance, with Gas, they had no retention. The way it was built to acquire users, but not to have any retention. So it makes sense for them to be acquired because at the end of the day, they're going to run out of users. They can't keep this acquisition strategy, especially if no one is going to use it over the longer term. And where I think an IPO comes into play is if you have high retention. So people coming back multiple times per day, and you can show that because then you can stand on your own legs and be like, no, we don't need to be bought out by Discord, by Meta, by Google, or any of those other big tech companies, because we have a product that works, people love us, and they keep coming back. And so I think with Envited, ultimately, I would love to build Envited to be a really strong retention-based product, something that people are coming back to often and multiple times per day, which then leads to more revenue avenues, might be ads. Alternatively, for events, it could be money transfers where you're transferring people for money or tickets. But the retention part of it really adds to it. And so hopefully building that into its own company. I mean, I think ever since I was in year 11 or 12, after watching Wolf of Wall Street, I've wanted to IPO a company. Hopefully it'll be Envited, but we'll see.
Very nice. Mihailo, so look, one thing that's very clear about you, so it was clear from you since the first time that I met you, is that you definitely have this sort of energy and empathy, and you look like you are having fun. You look like you're passionate about this.
Yep.
This is not everybody have that, so it's great to see that. So I do, regardless of the fact that I'm an investor in your business. So
Yeah.
I wish that Envited gets to where you would like to, and
Thank
I
you.
wish all the success. So for me, it's a privilege to have you here to share your journey. So there will be people hearing, listening, and watching us. So, and I think they get a little bit to inspire themselves. So thank you very much for coming.
No worries. Thanks so much, Wilson.
Yeah, cheers. Hello, everyone. This is Mihailo Bozic, so from Envited. So it's a privilege to have you here. I hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you soon in another episode of Changing the Game. Thank you.
Bye, guys.